Hello, G. Do you feel like listening to a story? I'd like to read you one by Stephen Leacock, a Canadian humorist who wrote in the early part of the last century. His work is now nearly 100 years old, but remarkably contemporary and very funny still. The one I want to read to you is called A, B, and C, the human element in mathematics. The student of arithmetic who has mastered the first 4 rules of his art and successfully striven with money sums and fractions finds himself confronted by an unbroken expanse of questions known as problems. These are short stories of adventure and industry with the end omitted, and though betraying a strong family resemblance, are not without a certain element of romance. The characters in the plot of a problem are 3 people called A, B, and C. And the form of the question is generally of this sort. A, B, and C do a certain piece of work. A can do as much work in 1 hour as B can in 2 or C in 4. Find how long they work at it. Or thus, A, B, and C are employed to dig a ditch. A can dig as much in 1 hour as B can dig in 2, and B can dig twice as fast as C. Find how long, etc., etc. Or A lays a wager that he can walk faster than B or C. A can walk half as fast again as B, and C is only an indifferent walker. Find how far, and so forth. The occupations of A, B, and C are many and varied. In the older arithmetics, they contented themselves with doing a certain piece of work. But this statement of the case was found too sly and mysterious, or perhaps lacking in romantic charm. It became the fashion, therefore, to define the job more clearly and to set them at walking matches, ditch digging, rowing in regattas, and piling chopped wood. At times, they became commercial and entered into partnership, having with their old mystery a certain capital. Above all, they revel in motion. When they tire of walking matches, A rides on horseback or borrows a bicycle and competes with his weaker-minded associates on foot. Now they race on locomotives, now they row, or again they become historical and engage stagecoaches. At times, they are aquatic and swim. If their occupation is actual work, they prefer to pump water into cisterns, 2 of which leak through holes in the bottom and only 1 is watertight. A, of course, gets the best one. He also takes the bicycle and the best locomotive and the right of swimming with the current. Whatever they do, they put money on it, being all 3 sporting men. A always wins. In the early chapters of the arithmetic, their identity is concealed under the names John, William, and Henry, and they wrangled over the division of marbles. In algebra, they are sometimes called X, Y, and Z, but these are only their Christian names, and they're actually the same people. Now, to one who has watched their history through countless pages of problems, seen them in their leisure hours dallying with chopped wood, observed their panting sides heave in the full frenzy of filling a cistern with a leak in it, they become something more than mere symbols. They appear as creatures of flesh and blood, living men, with their own passions, ambitions, and aspirations, just like the rest of us. Let us view them in turn. A He is a full-blooded, blustering fellow of energetic temperament, hot-headed and strong-willed. It is he who proposes everything, challenges B to work, makes the bets, bends the others to his will. He is a man of great physical strength and phenomenal endurance. He has been known to walk 48 hours at a stretch and to pump 96. But his life is arduous and full of peril. A mistake in the working of a sum may keep him digging a fortnight without rest. A repeating decimal in the answer might kill him. B is a quiet, easygoing fellow, afraid of A and bullied by him, but very kind and brotherly to little C, the weakling. B is quite in A's power, having lost all his money in bets. Poor C. He is an undersized, frail man with a plaintive face. Constant walking, digging and pumping has broken his health and ruined his nervous system. His joyless life has driven him to drink and smoke more than is good for him, and his hand often shakes as he digs. He has not the strength to work as the others can. In fact, as Hamlin Smith has said, A can do more work in 1 hour than C can in 4. The first time I ever saw these men was one evening after a regatta. They had all been rowing in it, and it had transpired that A could row as much in 1 hour as B could in 2 or C in 4. B and C had come in dead fagged, and C was coughing badly. "Never mind, old fellow," I heard B say. "I'll fix you up on the sofa, get you a cup of hot tea." But just then A came blustering in and said, "Hey, you fellows, Hamlin Smith has just shown me 3 cisterns in his garden. He says we can pump until tomorrow night. Come on, I bet I can beat you both." "Oh, you can pump in your rowing things." Your cistern leaks a little, I think, see?" I heard B growl that it was a shame and that C was all used up now, but they went. And presently from the sound of the water I could tell that A was pumping 4 times as fast as C. For years after that I used to see them constantly about town and always busy. I never heard of any of them sleeping or eating. Then, owing to a long absence from home, I lost sight of them. On my return, I was surprised to no longer find A, B and C at their accustomed tasks. On inquiry, I was told that work in this line is now being done by N, M and O, and that some people are employing for algebraical jobs 4 foreigners called Alpha, Beta, Gamma and Delta. Now, it chanced one day that I stumbled upon old D in the little garden in front of his cottage hoeing in the sun. D is an aged labouring man who used to sometimes be called in to help A, B and C. "Did I know 'em, sir?" he answered. "Sure, I knowed 'em. I knowed 'em since they were little boys in brackets. Master A, he were a fine fella, but I always said, gimme Master B for kind-heartedness like. Many is the job as we've been on together, sir, but I never did any of that racing or aught of that. Just the plain labour, as you might say. I'm getting too old and stiff for that now. I just scratch about in my garden and grow a logarithm or raise a common denominator or 2. But Mr. Euclid, he still use me for them propositions, he do." From the garrulous old man, I learned the melancholy end of my former acquaintances. Soon after I left town, he told me, C had been taken ill It seems that A and B had been rowing on the river for a wager, and C had been running on the bank and then sat in a draft. Of course, the bank had refused the draft, and C was taken ill. A and B came home and found C lying helpless in bed. A shook him roughly and said, "Get up, C, we're going to chop wood." But C looked so worn and pitiful that B said, "Look here, A, I won't stand this. He's not fit to chop wood tonight." But C smiled feebly and said, "Perhaps I could chop a little if I sat up." By now, B was thoroughly alarmed. He said, "Hey, I'm going to fetch a doctor. I think he's dying." "You got no money to fetch a doctor." "I'll reduce him to his lowest terms. That'll fetch him." Poor C might even then have been saved. But they made a mistake about the medicine. It had been kept at the head of the bed on a bracket, and the nurse accidentally removed it from the bracket without changing the sign. After this fatal blunder, C seems to have sunk rapidly, and on the evening of the next day, as the shadows lengthened in the little room, it was clear to all that the end was near. I think even A was affected, as he stood with his head bowed, aimlessly offering to bet with the doctor on C's chances of survival. "Eh," whispered C, "I think I'm going fast." "How fast do you think you'll go, old man?" "I don't know, but I'm going at any rate." The end came soon after that. C rallied for a moment and asked for a certain piece of work that he had left downstairs. B put it in his arms, and C expired. As his soul sped heavenward, A watched its flight with melancholy admiration. B burst into a passionate flood of tears and sobbed, "Put away his little cistern and the rowing clothes he used to wear. I feel as if I can hardly ever dig again." The funeral was plain and unostentatious. It differed in nothing from the ordinary, except that out of deference to sporting men and mathematicians, A engaged 2 hearses. Both vehicles started at the same time, B driving the one which bore the sable parallelepiped containing the last remains of his ill-fated friend. A, on the box of the empty hearse, generously consented to a handicap of 100 yards, but arrived first at the cemetery by driving 4 times as fast as B. Find the distance to the cemetery.